Thanks, Jackie. I will call to order this special meeting of the Bloomington Plan Commission for March 22nd, 2021. Let's begin by calling the roll.
Whistler,
Here.
Kinsey,
Here.
St. John,
Here.
Herrera,
Here.
Burrell,
Here.
Sandberg,
Here.
Seabour,
Here.
Cockrum,
Here.
Kate,
Here.
and Wright Randolph.
Here.
Great, thank you.
All right, we do have a quorum, so we will proceed. We have no minutes to be approved. Are there any reports, resolutions, or communications from staff before we get started?
No, we just want to clarify again. I'm sure, Brad, that you will talk about this hopefully briefly. What we're covering tonight does not include the Plex discussion or the final mapping discussion. Just to clarify for those joining us or watching somewhere else.
Yeah, but I'll get into that in a little bit more detail in just a moment. Any other reports or communications from commissioners before we get into the petitions? All right, seeing none, we'll jump into the agenda. There are 7 petitions that are still on our plate. As we discussed on our previous meeting on March 8th, we have a plan to sort of break these up into chunks. We handled some of the very simple ones at our first meeting. Tonight, we would like to get through all of the amendments to chapters 3, 4, 6, and 7, as well as, I believe, deletion of the RE zone in chapter 8. We will reserve our next meeting specifically to handle discussion of all the questions and amendments surrounding plexes. So that's ZO09-21. And then we'd like to have another meeting that is specifically dedicated to adoption of the new zoning map, which is ZO10-21. So what I'd like to do before we start is just to have a motion to go ahead and continue those two, ZO09-21 and ZO10-21, to our next meeting, which will be on Wednesday. So would someone like to make a motion to that effect? Jillian?
I'll motion to move ZO0921 and ZO1021 to our next meeting.
Okay, so the motion is to continue those to the next meeting. Do we have a second?
I second.
Flavia seconds. Okay. Jackie, will you call the roll on that vote, please?
Great. And just to clarify, the next meeting is on Thursday, the 25th. St. John?
Yes.
Thank you.
Herrera?
Yes.
Burrell?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Seabour?
Yes.
Cockrum?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
And Kinsey.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yes, and apologies. I think I did say Wednesday. The next meeting, I don't want there to be any confusion. The next meeting is Thursday, the 25th at this same time at 5:30. Okay, so that means we are now back to the petitions that we are going to take on tonight. We have, I believe, 5 different chapters we're going to address here, as well as some new amendments to those amendments that have come in since our last meeting. Most of these are amendments that have been proposed by staff. So I think what we'll do is we'll take these one by one. And Jackie, will you discuss the new amendments that were distributed as you take on each chapter?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay, so I think we will need to, we need to separately take action on those new amendments before, to sort of amend the amendments.
Mike can correct
before-
me, Mr. Rucker can correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, I believe so. So what I thought we would do is, for example, go over chapter 3, the proposal that was put out, and then I'll discuss the 2 amendments that we put forward, and then you would vote on each amendment separately, and then vote on the petition as amended.
That's what I thought. So we'll introduce the amendment. You'll give a presentation, and then we'll have motions to amend the amendment. And then once we conclude those motions, then we will vote on the adoption of the amendment as amended. If everybody's following that. So let's go ahead and get started with ZO-03-21. This is amendments to Chapter 3, Use Regulations. Jackie, you want to take it away?
Yes, I'm going to share my screen just a second. I can. Sorry, just having some Facebook issues trying to get us going on there. If we can. It's not working. Okay.
While Jackie's getting that together, just a quick note about public comment. We will take public comment on each of these as we go. As I mentioned, we're not going to be addressing the map or the Plex amendments tonight. So we're going to have a lot of opportunities for public comment tonight, but we need to ask that everybody keep those comments really constrained to the topic at hand. And we'll, and even as we're considering amendments to these amendments, we'll need to keep those comments really on target to the amendments to the amendments. Once we adopt or reject amendments to these amendments, we'll have opportunity for comment on the whole chapter amendment as well. And when that time comes, if you want to make comment, just click on the participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then click on the raise hand button, and we'll recognize you.
Great, thank you. Just a second, let's start it going here. Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep, we've got it.
Great. Okay, so this is, as Brad said, the Plan Commission hearing, our second Plan Commission hearing, to discuss the text amendments and map amendments that we've been working on. And we had a meeting on March 8th where we discussed 3 chapters. And then tonight we intend to discuss 4 chapters and then the deletion of the RE zoning district proposal. So 5 separate cases. On Thursday of this week, we intend to discuss the case related to the duplex, triplex, and fourplex text amendment. And then next Monday is the day slated for the official zoning map discussion. And then we have 2 days that we have noticed in case we need overflow days for any of our remaining discussions. And those are April 1st and April 5th. Okay, so our first petition tonight, ZO-0321, is related to Chapter 3 of the zoning code, which is the use regulation chapter. There are 28 amendments that staff identified. So just to go over again, only before this one, this applies to all of the chapters. When the code was adopted, we were given guidance by our consultant that general practice is to then use the code for a year or so and identify issues that have come up or things that you think might need to be changed, things that aren't quite working or missing. And so that is what the bulk of these, those that we saw last time and those that you'll see tonight stem from that type of work, working with the code and identifying what things could maybe work better. So here in Chapter 3, we have 28 amendments that staff identified, and we can kind of split them up into 7 categories. So we did that in the staff report for this evening. So the first I'll talk about is kind of a clarification. So this is similar to what we did last time, but maybe they were a little more detailed or a little less straightforward. So we went ahead and left them in the chapter to be discussed separately than with the kind of omnibus that we did last week. So the first is I'm just going to go over these, and let me know if you have any questions, of course, at the end. The first is that we have a temporary use called special event. It doesn't currently have any time limits. It's in the definition intended for things like fairs and other kind of time limited uses, but because there is no time limit, technically it could probably be used for much more. All of our other temporary uses have time limits. So we are adding the typical 15-day time limit to special event that our other temporary uses have as well. Second here is that we basically have some food protection fencing language in our landscaping, buffering, and fencing section, but the use specific standards for urban agriculture obviously live in the use chapter, this chapter. And so we're actually just duplicating that language here so that if someone comes here to read the information about the fencing because they're starting with the use, then they'll see that information. And just making it a little bit more accessible for what we've seen, with people calling with questions and things, that this might make it easier for someone to use. The third clarification is that what is in the code right now related to large and medium livestock, there are setback requirements for buildings related to those types of animals that can be used on residential property or can be housed on residential properties. And the setbacks are related to buildings that they'll be in or buildings that would maybe have their waste as well. And those setbacks are inherently just for large and medium livestock because the only livestock we call out in the code right now are large and medium. So we are planning to, you'll see later tonight, add the use small livestock. So we are clarifying that the setbacks that exist now are for the large and medium, and then we'll propose slightly smaller setbacks for the small animals. And for number 4, this one is very clarification. This is for fuel dispenser units. It is not clear in the code whether or not a fuel dispenser is one side of when you pull up, like at a gas station and you're on one side and someone's on the other. Does that count as one dispenser or does each side count it as its own? That becomes important when we're talking about scale of appropriate gas stations or accessory gas station uses, for example, at grocery stores, making that distinction or not doubles the number that they can have in. So we are clarifying that a fuel dispenser is one unit. So that if you and your neighbor are on either side of the fuel dispenser, you're using 2 units. So that is a clarification mostly for staff and then for those who are looking to utilize that use so they can be clear how many are allowed. Number 5 is that we currently allow the use self-storage, and there are regulations in the code related to the fact that they can be 2-story, and then that those uses, it describes how the storage units have to be utilized if they're on the 2nd floor, how they have to be designed. And we wanted to clarify that you could, in theory, in these districts, have a 2-story building where storage was on the 1st floor and a different uses on the top floor, that we wouldn't care if you were having your offices upstairs for a separate use that wasn't, it doesn't have to be self-storage on both floors, but it can be. And number 6, the regulations in code related to accessory structures always have been related to enclosed accessory structures. So that on the limits on the number and size for residential properties, we've always administered that as enclosed. It may have said enclosed in the old code. I can't recall off the top of my head, but we are just proposing to add the word enclosed so that it's clear that that's what we're regulating with those standards, and not some of the other open accessory structures we see, such as carports, don't count against your square footage of allowance for accessory structures. And then the last one is pretty simple. We have a use for farm produce sales, and the code currently says that you can't operate for more than 180 consecutive days in a year. So in theory, if you stop, every time you stop operating, every week you take Sunday off, you're starting over. So you operate all year. And it seems clear that the code intended for it to be limited to a typical farm produce growing season, spring to fall. So we are clarifying that 180 days is actually annually, and that the consecutive is not the appropriate regulation for that. So the second category is related to student housing. We added the use student housing is of course allowed in the mixed use student housing district, but we went ahead and added the use specific standards that previously weren't located there, so that we could add the building floor plate maximum to the use in that district as well, to help regulate appropriate size of buildings, and that may have been an oversight to leave that out. And so we are putting that back in. We are doing 2 other changes here: student housing separation requirement increases, as well as reducing building floor plate maximums. We have had a number of development interests, parties interested in development in our projected student housing area. And one thing that we've kind of seen is that potentially the numbers that we have in the code now might be a little bit bigger than we had anticipated, kind of maybe being appropriate, or maybe being that they are a little bit higher than we would have liked to get the kind of development we want. So we are proposing to include the separation requirements when buildings are on one lot, so that if you have a large lot, for example, a redevelopment site, and that you still cannot just do student housing back to back down the development site, that those uses have to be separated as they would if you were on different lots. And then we're also reducing the building floor plate maximum, so that kind of right sizing the building a little. If you are taking advantage of the affordable housing incentives in either scenario, then those rules change and become exempt from that requirement, with the idea being that if you are putting in extra units in order to help address the affordable housing unit shortage, then your building will be slightly larger than otherwise allowed. And that is similar for buildings in the RH zoning district. We reduce those by a story as well. Same idea with the incentive, affordable housing incentives, that if you are going to utilize those, then you can have the 1-story. And then we had a couple here related to parking as well. So these are both related. The first is related to multifamily, and basically it's a regulation on indoor parking. So there is currently no language limiting the amount of ground floor of a building that can be used for parking. So what we are proposing is that similar to what we do on a site when parking is visible outside of the building, that inside of the building, if you're going to have a built-in parking garage, that you do have to set it back at least 20 feet from a public facade that's facing a street, so that there's room there for another use, a lobby or a commercial use, or something of that nature, to help improve the interface between your building and the public right of way, so that it's not just a blank wall, because on the other side there are cars, and the only other option would be, an open traditional parking lot, or having lights out onto the street. So we have proposed to have that set back in the building for multifamily use, so that to improve kind of the pedestrian interface between those types of large buildings that typically are large in their surroundings. And then the other is for student housing. We're proposing something similar, limiting to 15% of the ground floor of a building adjacent to the street. Student housing will mostly occur in the student housing district. That is, we don't want to limit it too strictly with some of these requirements, but we do still want, the design and function to work well. And in this way, we're also limiting so that a ground floor isn't entirely a parking garage. Basically, both of these stipulations do that, just in slightly different ways. Okay, the next category is livestock. So we spoke about, I mentioned this a moment ago. We are proposing reduced setbacks for livestock for smaller animals. So that would be a front setback of 35 feet, side setbacks of 15, and rear setback of 25, which is slightly less than what is required now for the buildings that contain large and medium animals. And so that would be a new provision, because the definition for small livestock doesn't exist yet. And then we would also be proposing that in the code now, how many animals you have is regulated by how much pasture you have. But for small livestock, a lot of them don't necessarily need pasture, and some are hand fed or just need smaller areas. So we changed the small livestock regulation to be based on whether or not you meet minimum lot size for your zoning district, and left the others as pasturage based, because typically a medium or large animal will definitely need some sort of pasturage to be well sustained. So that will allow smaller livestock on smaller lots in town than otherwise would if we did require pasturage for those as well. And then adding small livestock to the table of uses, of course, is something that is required for the new use. And this came up, I think, at council and not plan commission, but I could be wrong. We may have done this at plan commission, but this came up in 2019. We tried to add a provision to the table that I was just referencing, having to do with how much space is required per animal. We tried to add a note to incorporate small livestock, and that just didn't really work out. So now we've added an actual definition. We're removing that reference, removing that note. And then there's also an existing reference to the age of smaller animals when you are determining how many you can have on a lot, and down to the month. And because that is very difficult for us, or maybe even an owner sometimes, to know, we're going to go ahead and take that out and treat them all the same based on size and which category they fall into. That's the plan. Accessory structures is another topic that's covered. We are changing the way that accessory structures are regulated slightly in the non-primarily single-family residential zoning districts, so RM, RH, and RMH, as well as at the bottom, you can see the mixed-use districts. So basically right now, sometimes we run into the problem where the regulation doesn't really match the scale of the property. So we have, let's see, we have a maximum square footage. And and also, by the way, anyone else who works here, Ryan or Eric or Keegan, feel free to jump in if I'm missing a detail. But the way that it works, accessory structures, for example, we said in the staff report, we're adding a minimum square footage to the maximum footprint for accessory structures, so that developments with only 1 or 2 small buildings can have typical accessory structure sized structures. So basically, because it was percentage based only before, if you had only small buildings, then you couldn't even have accessory structures that were like the size of what a typical single family was allowed. So we added a base minimum in, so that everyone can have the same type of access, because we often get questions and find that those types of uses, multifamily uses, want to store the types of things that they use to care for the buildings on site. And if that's not possible because the regulation is too stringent, that's why we wanted to go ahead and propose that change. Again, we did that here on number 4, a similar thing for the mixed use districts. And then the middle 2 are kind of related to, they're both related to agricultural uses and a little bit related to the ZO 0821 that we'll see later this evening. We want to delete the 50% maximum in the RE zoning district. That will become moot if the RE zoning district goes away. But if it doesn't, we still would ask to do that. Basically, you know, one of the purposes of the RE zoning district initially, it was to have a place for agricultural uses, that they could be functional and use large spaces. And one of the things that's often needed for that type of use is large structures to house the types of equipment that is needed for a successful small farm even. And the way that the regulation is written, because the district is also residential, what ends up happening is the current maximum is 50% of your primary structure. So if you live in a typical size home, then 50% of your structure isn't very much square footage for a barn that you might need to take care of 10 acres. So we are proposing to strike that that 50% maximum. Again, this will become moot if the other provision is approved, or the other, case is approved tonight. But we do think that we have seen that over time. And you all may remember it was kind of an issue when we did the rezone for Duncan Campbell on tap, that was something he had to get a variance from to be able to rezone to RE because he had typical barn structures on the lot. And then the third one here is we would like to, this is in the same vein, exempt agricultural structures from the size limitation. So you will still be limited, of course, by impervious surface coverage and setbacks and any other environmental restrictions that are on the lot. None of those things go away. We just would allow structures being used for agricultural uses in the in these more agricultural districts to not be size limited. And we have two more here, accessory dwelling units. You will recall potentially that initially when we accessory dwelling units were approved a number of years ago, at that time as a conditional use, there was a requirement that you had to meet the minimum lot size. Those lot sizes have changed quite a bit with our new code. For example, the old RC minimum lot size was 7,200. It's now 5,000. So in the RS went from 8,400 down to 7,200. We have found when people call and request information about doing ADUs, that mostly all this regulation is doing is limiting that option for parcels that you would not be able to tell, you know, walking down the street are any different than the neighbor. So I think it was put in as a bit of a stopgap to make sure that the extra unit could be appropriate. But we have found that with the impervious surface coverage, again, setback requirements, accessory dwelling unit maximum requirements, that all of those things do also limit the possibility for ADUs in such a way that minimum requiring that they meet the district minimum lot size doesn't really add anything. And all it's doing is kind of excluding the option for some people along blocks, for example, where everyone else is able to meet. And it's just kind of creating a weird dichotomy in a neighborhood between those who can apply for them and those who cannot, where the facts on the ground really don't support leaving that in. So we are proposing to take that out. The second is more of a clarification. There is a maximum gross floor area in code for detached ADUs. The language is just a little wonky, and we want to make sure that it's clear that the gross floor area maximum is for the ADU only and not for anything else that may be in the structure. So the typical example is a garage. So if you had, you know, obviously floor area for your vehicles, and then we're adding a unit for a detached ADU, that unit would be the only thing that we would be looking at to determine what the appropriate square footage is against code. So that's not really changing. It's just clarifying in the code that it's for that area only. The third one is actually something that we think probably was just missed in the update. The setback, side and rear setbacks for the old code allow 5 feet, and the new code was requiring 10 for, I believe, rear. So we are just proposing to put those back to what was previously in code and approved with the initial update. There were, I think there were some differentiations about existing structures and new structures and originally, but we are just proposing to go to a straight 5 and 5, which is the setback in most single family districts for accessory structures, or all single family districts for accessory structures. And then the last is interested party notifications. So that was left in the 2019 April 2020 update. So interested party notifications requires that if someone is going to build an ADU, they need to notify their neighbors within 300 feet or 2 properties deep on all sides that they're planning to do that, which I think we left in as kind of a nod to the neighbors. We're letting you know this thing's happening. What functionally, it's kind of created confusion, as some of our other items we'll get to later also have for members of the public, because they're receiving this letter and then there isn't really anything they can do about it because it's a by right approval. They could, I believe they could potentially appeal to the Board of Zoning Appeals, but as long as the ADU is meeting all of the requirements, that wouldn't be probably very fruitful. Because it is a by right use now. So we are proposing to actually take that notification out. We have found that it seems to only be causing confusion for those who are notified of it. And because the use is by right, we don't require notice for almost all by right uses. And so we are trying to take those that do require kind of over and above. We are trying to limit those uses. So this is one where we're proposing to remove that. And finally, the last topic I would say for chapter 3 is home occupation. This is one where we are trying to kind of meet the world where it is. And previously home occupation requirements didn't allow you to use more than 15% of your home for home occupation use, which isn't very much in some of our smaller homes. Obviously, because of the pandemic, lots of people are working at home. We also are having more interest. We've been having more interest over the last few years in this type of use. People wanting to run small businesses, getting them started at home, and having to be very careful about that 15% maximum. We are proposing to up that to 50 and leaving all of the other restrictions so that you would still not be able to change basically the character of the main use of your property, that it has to be residential mainly. None of the other requirements are changing related to parking requirements or signage or number of people who can visit, number of employees. All of that is still very limiting. We are just proposing that the actual square footage in the house could be, more of it could be utilized for home occupation. And then we are also proposing to extend that use to accessory structures. So currently, if you would like to run a home occupation, you have to do it in the residence on your property. And we've had a number, I would say over time, it's a pretty consistent request where people ask if they could set something up in their garage, or, they might have like a small shed that they would like to use as kind of a workshop or a studio, but because it's commercial, as something that they're going to be selling, then we have to limit those. And we have some uses that we are able to use for those types of uses that aren't commercial, but we don't necessarily want to limit that people be able to, utilize those kind of structures for uses that are having the same effect as if they were just doing those things for themselves. So we are proposing to allow them in accessory structures. It's kind of described in both of these amendments here. And then clarifying that there are some exempted uses. So the types of uses where you're, like if you're doing everything on the computer, there are things that are exempted in code still, and that those aren't the ones that we're looking to regulate. We're looking to size regulate non-exempted uses. That is what the code says, but we're just trying to clarify that a little bit for if someone's reading it cold. Okay, so we have two proposed plan commission amendments. Jillian Kinsey agreed to propose them for us, so thank you. These are actually from staff, and I'll just say a little intro, which is this came up in a rezoning discussion we recently had for a property that we are proposing in the map update to be ME. And there was a lot of discussion about whether or not supportive commercial uses needed to be expanded in the ME, so that if there was ME stands for mixed use employment, so that if there were employment uses to go in there, that they could be sustained and have other accessory uses around. And so that is what these two amendments are trying to address. I don't know if you have anything to add, Jillian.
Nothing to add, no.
Okay. So I think, Ryan, were you able to get those up on the website?
Yes, and I posted them in the chat.
Okay, perfect. So in the chat, you can follow the link to the website to see the 5 amendments that have been proposed for tonight. I apologize, it's late. I was having technical difficulties, but those are up. So if you, I'm describing them here, but if you want to see them in more detail, they're there. And just to also for reference, the red lines and tables of all these amendments we're discussing tonight are on the website, have been on the website for a number of weeks. So do feel free to check those out there as well. Or Plan Commission members, I can pull either of those things up here if that would be easier than just discussing. Yeah, so that's what we have here, a large smattering of use regulation amendments, mostly just correcting things that we have found seem to be a little off, or clarifying practices that we're already doing. And then these two here are two that came after we had put the original list together, and both intended to make the ME district maybe more usable and friendlier to kind of auxiliary commercial uses, while allowing the primary focus of that district to remain employment. So I can answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Jackie. What I would like to do is start with the amendments, and let's get those out of the way, and then we'll come back to sort of the broader petition. So for starters here, does anyone have any questions about amendment number 1 to ZO 0321? This is adding retail sales as a permitted use in the mixed use employment. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay, would someone like to make a motion on that? Jillian, your amendment, would you like to move for adoption of that amendment?
I'll move for adoption of to amendment ZO 0321 to allow add P to the ME column for retail sales medium and table 03-1 allowed use table.
Okay, yeah, and this is amendment number 1, as was listed on the website and I think distributed via email to the commissioners as well. All right, so we have
Second.
a motion and a second. Jackie, we call the roll on amendment number 1, please.
Do you need to take public comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, thank you. We do.
That's okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, we will take public comment on this. If you would like to make comment, click on the participants tab, click on the raise hand button. And again, please, this is only for comment on amendment number 1 here on whether we should add retail sales as a permitted use in mixed-use employment. Is there anyone who would like to make comment on that amendment?
Yes, Paul's hand was up, but just a second, I'll unmute you, Paul. There you go. You're ready, Paul. Yeah.
It's Elizabeth Cox-Ash. I'm Paul's wife. What I would like to ask is, do we really need additional retail space when we already have so much vacant retail space? And this could be a way a developer who is doing a project could pay for it better if he did not have to do retail space, because generally retail space takes longer to rent and to find a tenant for. And if you do find a tenant and business is bad, like what has happened this past year with COVID, they could file bankruptcy and they could be gone. So do we really need to have that option with this? I'm just asking a question. I'm done.
All right. Thank you. Are there any other members of the public who would like to make comment on amendment number 1? I don't see any.
I don't see any. I don't have any
Nothing on-
messages, and there's nothing on Facebook.
Okay, all right, well, we are back then to the commission. Is there any final comment or final questions before we call the roll on amendment number 1? Jillian?
Perhaps we can respond to the public comment with regard to the purpose of this is, Jackie, I don't know if you want to describe anything more, that we're expanding the permitted use here. So I don't know if you want to expand on.
Sure. Yeah. So a couple things. It's a little confusing, but no, it's not required. We're not requiring that they build commercial here. It is being allowed at a smaller scale than allowed in other places. So medium retail maximum here and 5,000 square foot restaurant. So that what feedback we've gotten from the local development community that we got during the Bill C. Brown Fullerton discussion is that large swaths that are zoned ME do make it difficult because there aren't enough supportive commercial uses allowed. And those were 2 that were discussed at length. And so we are proposing to include those so that they could, for example, help a campus, an employment campus that was built, could have a restaurant that was larger than a small coffee shop, or could have a small retailer there as well. So not a mandate, just an option.
I'm sorry, Susan, go ahead.
And yes, just to kind of help clarify, this was actually the petitioner who was requesting a rezone from ME, which is what, the plan, the UDO calls for, to MC, because they thought it would help the development of that property to be more employment oriented. We want more good jobs attracted to this community, that there could be some supporting retail that was mostly like a restaurant that could be of value to that particular area. And so the petitioner themselves were the ones asking for more flexibility with respect to having a larger restaurant nearby, so they wouldn't have to get into their cars, the people that were in the employment center, and drive further away in order to have a meal in the middle of their day. So just for further clarification, I know it can sometimes be a little difficult when we're talking MC and ME and P, and just kind of break it down for the public to understand that this is coming from people who want to develop their properties into employment centers. Thanks.
Thank you, Susan. Any other questions or final comments from commissioners? All right, seeing none, Jackie, would you call the roll on amendment number 1, please?
Ferrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John.
Yes.
So amendment 1 passes 9-0.
All right, excellent. Let's move to amendment number 2. Again, the sponsor here is Commissioner Kinsey.
Yeah.
Would you like to introduce this or make a motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to approve Amendment 2 for ZO 0321. This refers to again, Chapter 3 changes. And in this proposal, we're proposing to change the ME zoning district to allow a restaurant that shall contain no more than 5,000 gross square feet of floor area. So we've kind of talked about this a little bit in the previous discussion, but this is a specific amendment about changing that restaurant size floor area.
Okay,
Second.
so, all right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions from commissioners on this? Okay, let's go to public comment. If you would like to comment specifically on amendment number 2 here, which is to increase the allowable size of a restaurant in the in the ME zoning district, please click on your participants tab, click on the raise hand button, and you will have 5 minutes to comment.
I don't have any chats. I don't see anything.
Not seeing any either. Okay, then we are back to the commission for any final comment on amendment number 2 before we call the roll. Okay, Jackie, will you call the roll on amendment number 2, please?
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
and Herrera.
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, amendment passes. So we are now back to ZO 03-21 as amended. So we'll now go to any questions that commissioners may have about the petition as amended. So this would include all the things that Jackie ran through in her previous presentation. Do you have any questions for Jackie on this? I see Commissioner Kate. Go ahead.
Jackie, I just have a quick question about the days limit for agricultural sales. Why is there any limit, numerical limit on that? I'm just curious, particularly if with climate change and other forces, there may be variations to what may have been a normal agricultural season in the past. I have no idea how that might, affect the time frame, but why is there any limit on that at all?
I think that traditionally there is a limit included of 180 days in many zoning codes in this type of climate or area to kind of target that growing season, as I mentioned. It is, it's an allowable residential use. I think once something that is accessory like that, but kind of has its own life, becomes more permanent, then it kind of maybe takes away from the primary use on the lot. It's a kind of a way to limit and keep it as accessory to the residential use on the lot, as opposed to kind of turning over the lot into a farm stand basically all year long. So I think the 180 days just comes from the idea of temporary uses being temporarily limited so that they don't kind of change the purpose of those areas where they're used. So I mean, it's a strictly commercial use. If it was set up all year, in most of our residential neighborhoods, we would probably receive calls about that. Even ones that we have now that do meet code, we do receive complaints about because they are kind of impactful as far as people stopping and having more people in the neighborhood. So I think because the use can be kind of intense and because it is based on a growing season, typically in most zoning codes, that's where the 180 days comes from.
Okay, thanks. Have there been any issues on the other side that have come up for you all about, this is long enough for people wanting to do it longer? Or has it been mostly on the side of, this is disruptive when it's pulled
I would
forward?
say, yeah, anyone jump in if I'm wrong, but I would say what we've mostly had enforcement wise is people being concerned that the scales of those that exist are too big or wanting them to be more limited. As opposed to people wanting to do them more, I think.
Okay.
But I think it's a good question. I mean, it's definitely probably changing. It's definitely an older regulation that's been around for some time.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a living document, so I guess if they encounter those changes, come back and revisit it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, I just have a really quick question, Jackie. On page 6 of the packet under livestock, item number 2, I don't know, am I reading that wrong? Is that a typo or?
Oh, probably. Well, let's see.
It says amend the table to clarify it lists. I just think something's missing there.
Oh yeah, probably. Okay. Amend. Let's see, area required for animals.
So it's, yeah.
So that it lists. So basically,
Okay.
what in the red line, you can see the tip right now. It says pasturage size, and so we're changing it to say area required. And then for the large and mediums, it'll still be pasture size, but for the small, it'll just be the minimum lot size.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
All right, Commissioner Kinsey.
Jackie, I have a question just to clarify the
Yes.
removal of interested party notification for ADUs. I just want to make sure that we're being clear that right now that would just remove that whole section that is a description of noticing and property, the distance to the property, that whole section in the UDO would be removed because it's out of alignment with what we described earlier about what needs to be noticed. So essentially, because this is a permitted by right use and accessory dwelling units are allowed, that noticing is it's in conflict with what's described earlier about the purpose of notifying and when. Just want to make sure I'm clear about that.
Sure. Let me see if I can. Hold on just a second. Sorry. I'm just going to pull it up while we talk about it, if that's okay, really quickly, if I can. Okay. So what is in the code now, you see here stricken in red, is a typical notice requirement for anything that goes to the Board of Zoning Appeals or hearing officer, which this did initially. As a conditional use. When it switched over to by right, we did discuss whether we should leave it in or take it out. We do not send notice for other by right uses. We decided to leave it in as kind of like an interim measure to see how that would work, with the idea of, what does extra notice hurt? It's just letting the neighbors know, hey, this is coming in. But what we've seen in practice is that people have some understanding of what notice means, and then they want to come to a hearing or, be able to remonstrate against the use, but it's not a subjective use, it's by right. So then that has mostly just created kind of issues for some of the neighbors around a couple. I would just say we haven't had very many, but the ones that we've heard from have been people who are like, oh, well, why did I get this if I can't do anything about it? So yes, it is not our practice to send notice to the neighbors for uses that are by right, typically. And when this became a by right use, we didn't take it out, but we probably should have, because it does then give the appearance that it's not a by right, and it is. I
Thank
don't
you.
know if that answered. Okay.
Yes, that's clarifying. Thank you.
Thank you. Additional questions from commissioners?
Oh, we have I think this is someone who wanted to comment on this issue but didn't realize now is the time. Just a member of the public.
Wanted to comment on this specific issue here of the.
Yes, a
ADUs?
chapter 3. Oh yeah, we haven't done that yet. I'm so
Yeah,
sorry.
we have not
Just ignore
yet
me.
done public.
Yeah.
So yes, we're in commissioner questions now. When we complete these questions,
Thank
then
you,
we will
sorry.
go to public comment on anything in ZO 03-21 as amended. So there will be an opportunity for public comment coming up. Any other questions from commissioners on ZO 03-21? I've got a couple of questions, Jackie, with relation to the changes of the floor plate maximum size in student housing. I know you mentioned that it's cutting that in half. Can you give us the specifics on
Yes.
on that? What is it now and what is it going to in this
Yeah.
amendment?
Let me go to the red line really quickly. We'll put that back up. In just a second. Okay. So you can see here. Oh wait, that's not right. I'm so sorry. Just a sec. I just don't want to tell you the wrong number. Okay. Okay, so these are listed in the use specific standards for student housing or dormitory use. And the first, okay, so building floor plate is here. It would be being reduced from 5,000 to 2,500 in the MN. So that's our smallest mixed use district. And then in the residential multifamily and downtown districts, reduced from 10,000 to 5,000. Again, if a developer were to utilize the affordable housing incentives, then the idea would be, then they would potentially need more room than otherwise to accommodate some of those extra units. And so then they could, they would be able to go up to the other maximum. In the RH, MM, MC and MI, you can see here on number 3, it's reduced from 20,000 to 10,000. And then we put in a maximum of 20,000 in the MS, obviously our most intense student housing area. Does that answer your question?
Yes. Does that apply to the total floor plate, or is that a per building? If I had a development with multiple buildings on the same lot?
It's per building.
Per building. Okay.
Yes.
So I could theoretically achieve the same maximum I had before this would be adopted, if it is adopted, by breaking up a development into 2 buildings or multiple buildings. It doesn't decrease the maximum developable area on a lot. It just decreases the maximum footprint of each building.
Sure. We did also include this provision, however, that if you're on one lot, you do have to have the 300-foot separation now that you would have to have if you were on separate lots. So in conjunction, that does change a little bit. That does change what is here. But yes, in theory, you could still have the same amount of building footprint if you had the room to meet the separation as well.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Okay.
And then I guess my next question is with relation to that. If we're reducing the footprint of each building and we're limiting the amount of that footprint that can be used for parking on the first floor to 50%, we're in effect cutting the amount of any first floor that can be used for parking down to 25% of what it would have been prior to adoption of this.
For the first floor, yes. You can have parking on floors above as well, but yes.
Yeah, I get that, but I guess my concern, and maybe you can address this, is just, I mean, that seems like a big change that could create some engineering problems. I mean, you have to have a certain amount of space just to have a ramp up to the second floor and to have ingress and egress. Have you guys looked into that at all? Do you have any sense of kind of
No,
what
that's a good question. I would say no. It's hard because we offer not only the affordable housing, I mean, you could use the affordable housing incentives to get more space that you need. We are, I think, still, this code is still kind of new, and we're trying to find that sweet spot where we are allowing development, but are also encouraging people to use incentives, not just affordable housing, of course, but our green incentives, other things.
Mhm.
And so, the numbers that are there now are still doable, but you maybe would have to engage incentives that you otherwise currently wouldn't engage.
Yeah, I mean, I totally understand the goal here. I know, in some of these buildings, I think in one of them it's down to 2,500 square foot and 50%. I mean, I'm quite certain that 1,250 square feet is not enough to get a ramp of any kind to a parking garage. And so my concern is, does this just make indoor parking,
Sure.
just take it off the table for developments that otherwise would be wanting to do
Sure. So the
indoor parking? Because I think
50%, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
just because I was just going to say, I think, we want to encourage indoor parking versus outdoor parking wherever we can. And so my concern is that this may kind of run counter to that.
Right. Let me
That
check
goal.
something quickly, sorry. Okay, yeah. No, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so yes, I think that's a good question.
I know that may be difficult to answer on the fly. I guess the thing that I would be looking for is just maybe a little more guidance on
Yeah.
what is kind of the minimum footprint you need to have a first floor parking to get a ramp in there to up to floors
Sure.
above it for parking, and just to a sanity check on whether this is going to be.
Andrew, would you
Very
have any thought
restricted.
guidance on that? And you might not, sorry to put you on the spot, but I just didn't know if that was something you may have experienced with.
I am trying to play with my calculator really quickly, but I don't have anything off the cuff, but just, I don't have any initial thoughts right now.
Okay.
So I would say, yeah, if we're trying, if you think those two things are incongruous, options would be, of course, to remove one of them from the proposal tonight. Let's see.
Yeah, I think
And then the other thing would be, if it went through and then we could provide more information to council, and if it was, if it was deemed to make it too difficult to build, we would let them know that. And then, if they think that the incentives are enough of an option to figure it out, then they can approve it or take that out, because they can amend the text amendments, of course.
Okay, yeah, I'll let me give that a little thought as to whether I want to offer an amendment on that. I won't do that just yet. Any other? That was my only question. So let's go back to commissioners. I see Commissioner Kinsey has another question. Go ahead.
Sorry, one more clarification about the fencing of urban agriculture, non-commercial fencing addition. Can you, Jackie, I don't know if you can say where that was described in the UDO as part of, in its association with the landscape. So all we're doing is moving the description up into urban agriculture to clarify that fencing is permitted.
Yeah, it's kind of a, hold on, let me see. It was kind of an internal discussion. So it's in the fencing standards, which makes sense because the way that it was written last time, it references the other standards. So it references where fences are allowed that aren't urban. But I'm sorry, that aren't food protection. But because we have found that, when people are looking to see, hey, what can I do to do that particular use, that we think we're not actually taking it out of fences, we're just duplicating it and putting it in specific standards as well.
Okay. Yeah,
Does
I
that
think
make sense?
Yeah, so this is not a change per
it's
se,
not.
but it's a clarification.
It exists in the development standards chapter, and then now it will just also exist in the use chapter. We have a few things that are kind of duplicated because they could be gotten to in different ways. And that's how we have chosen to kind of cross-reference them.
Yeah, my sense is this rounds out the urban agriculture, non-commercial structure discussion more. It's relevant in that.
Right.
Yeah, okay. Thanks.
Eric, did you have something to add about Brad's question? I just realized you wouldn't.
Well, I was just going to say, with a 5,000 square foot building, you're not going to have any kind of interior parking. That's just too small. And frankly, with a 10,000 square foot, you're probably not going to have any parking within the building as well. So I don't think we're probably going to run into that too much with that small of a footprint.
Thank you.
We are, but otherwise, maybe, so let me just clarify that. I mean, we do have a 20,000 square foot footprint that we're reducing to 10,000. So I guess, Eric, is that something where, it would be feasible with a 20,000 square footprint?
I think it would be very difficult in 10,000 square feet to get parking within a building.
Right, but not within 20,000.
20,000, I think it becomes more possible. You're probably not going to have a building devoted to it, but you might have a portion of the ground floor that would have parking underneath it. So you probably wouldn't experience, with that small of a footprint, you probably wouldn't experience a building with multiple stories of parking garage in it, but you would have a portion of each building with maybe parking underneath it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Any other questions from commissioners? Commissioner Burrell, I see your hand waving. Go ahead.
On the home occupation, that first sentence, you're talking about home, not accessory dwellings, going from 15% to 50%. It says home occupation, change the home occupation maximum from 15% of the structure used to 50% of the structure to reflect changing practices in how and where people work. Are we talking about home? I mean, that is the primary home?
Yes. So here, I'll share this as well. In the red line, you can see here what we currently have: maximum floor area no more than 15% of areas of a dwelling unit. And so we would be proposing to change that to 50. I don't think it differentiates between primary home and accessory dwelling unit. It just says dwelling unit. Ryan, you can correct me if I'm wrong on that. But because we're allowing them in accessory structures, I think if you lived in someone's ADU, you could run a home occupation there. You can meet the other requirements. If that was your question.
Yeah, that's why I was confused. I didn't know if this was just for ADUs or if it was for all.
No, this is for all home occupations. So you can see here, this is for home occupations for mostly, I would say generally for someone running a business out of their home, the primary house on a lot. And then we're extending it to accessory structures, not just accessory dwelling units, because as I said, we have run into a number of times people trying to do like small studios or woodworking where it is basically commercial. It's not just for a hobby in their garage or, you know, accessory shed, and code doesn't allow that.
Is there, have you also looked at a list of allowable home occupations? Did that change any with?
No, we aren't proposing to change use at all.
Okay.
All
Thank
right. Any additional questions from commissioners? Okay, well, I think it is then time for public comment on ZO 03-21 as amended. If you'd like to make comment, click on the participants tab or participants button at the bottom of your screen, and then click the raise hand button. And when you are recognized, you'll have 5 minutes to make your comment. If you have any trouble with the raise hand button or figuring that out, feel free to just send a chat. Click on the chat button and send us a chat and let us know you'd like to make comment. We'll try to keep an eye on both to make sure everyone gets their chance to speak. Again, this is comment specifically on ZO 03-21 amendments to the use regulations.
Okay, Peter, are you there?
I am. Yes, it's Peter Dorfman from the Near West Side. We have had a number of conversations about this issue of whether the fact that something is a permitted use obviates the need for public notice. I just have to object in the strongest possible terms to the suggestion that it should be removed as a requirement for ADUs. Yeah, I get it that it's permitted and there's nothing legally that a neighbor could do to prevent construction of an ADU if they objected. And I know that you can't legislate private disputes between individuals, but notification serves a really important purpose in avoiding the need for those disputes. If people have the opportunity to know what's coming, they can enter into a discussion and maybe iron out something that could become a problem down the road and really doesn't need to. You know, if we were talking about enclosing a front porch or, you know, even adding a carport, that would be one thing. But, you know, I'm aware of, in my neighborhood, 2 ADUs, detached ADUs that have been built in the last couple of years. They are 2-story apartment over garage. And a structure like that changes the landscape. You know, if you're a serious gardener, a 2-story building placed in a way that blocks the sunlight that you want on your garden, it may not sound like a big deal, but it could cause a serious disagreement between neighbors that could become really unpleasant and really unnecessary. And I just think the removal of that requirement simply on the basis of the fact that ADU is an allowed use, a permitted use, it's indefensible. I just can't agree with that. I know that this has been raised before, and there are many other people who feel the same way. So I just wanted to register that objection. Somebody needed to. That's all I've got. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. I see.
Mr. Lewis?
Oh, there you go.
Hi there, Richard Lewis from the Prospect Hill neighborhood. Thank you all for doing a special meeting tonight and for your time. I appreciate that. I will say that I have been a big fan of the ADUs since they were first proposed a few years back, or perhaps several years back, because time flies. And I think they're a great tool to help us work toward affordable home ownership and homeowner options, since we can require that the owner must be in one or the other of the buildings on the property. I would also like the notification process to remain in place. We went on a 2-year pilot program, if I remember correctly, for ADUs as a conditional use, and they've fairly recently gone into by right use, which again, I think is great. I think they're still new enough so that it would be helpful to learn. Maybe if the statement is worded in such a way so that it doesn't raise people's expectations that they need to speak out. A neighbor of ours, a back fence neighbor, worked on an ADU earlier this year, and we received notification. I was a little confused. I thought that there would be a chance to speak in support of it at a hearing, and then I found out, oh, that's not actually necessary. But it is new enough so that I think it could still be helpful for us. You know, for me, it's just, as a neighbor, it's exciting to learn that people are making use of these options on their properties. But I would support keeping the notification in place. Thank you so much.
Riga Wood? Go ahead.
I just want to support Peter's suggestion that the requirement for notice be retained. I did.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
See a couple more hands raised. Jackie, who do we have next?
Ash?
Okay, this is Elizabeth Cox Ash. I, again, would support Peter's recommendation for notification. I just think it's only fair to let the neighbors know what's going on. This works out best for neighborhoods so that people actually know what's going on and they can work out disagreements with each other, so it's not involving the city or lawsuits or anything else more costly. I just think it's the neighborly thing to do. That's all I have to say.
Mr. Roblewski? Mark?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm new at this. I just want to say this, Mark Robleski from Elm Heights. I also support what Mr. Dorfman said. I'd like to see the language left in. By removing it, to me, removes all transparency and removes any discussions between neighbors. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm not seeing any other hands raised. Are there any other?
I've got one more here.
Comment. Oh,
Mr. Wells? Should be able to unmute. Go ahead.
Yes, hello. My name is Rick Wells. I'd like to very respectfully comment that as a member of the community that's impacted by your mission, it seems you're moments away from voting on a resolution that is clearly missing some basic logic with respect to parking structure architecture. and making some conjectures on the fly that might impact me and my community. It makes me wonder if the council has engaged the appropriate experts in diversity and thought to approach what's the bigger issue and discussion, specifically the feasibility, the outcome, and the communication of such on upzoning my community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Shoot. Tron. Hold on.
I was just trying to jump the gun before it got back to you.
Okay.
Nice,
I was
nice
confused.
try.
I was like, wait
Nice
a
try.
minute.
We're still on public comment. Let's do a last call here for public comment. Anyone else want to make public comment on ZO 03-21? All right. Anything on Facebook?
No, nothing there.
Okay, we are then back to the commission for any final comment or motion on ZO 03-21. And Tron, you're up first.
Yes. So sorry, I'm having connectivity, so I'm going to leave my video off for the remainder of the meeting. But I do want to echo some of the concerns about not making it a public notice with some of the ADUs. I did speak about this when we originally were hearing it. So I do agree that we should leave that in place. It's something new. I do understand it's going to take the administration and planning staff a bit more time, but not only that public is going to be aware of it, they're going to know if it has occurred in their neighborhood, and they might pay attention to it. So next time we're looking at an ordinance rewrite, they might come with concerns. So I think there's a bigger picture here, being so new and being so fresh, and I think it should be in place, and we should look at this down the road a bit more, so we're not jumping the gun. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Tron. Commissioner Kate.
So I'm interested to hear this discussion about the notice. I don't actually, I think, feel strongly one way or about this or the other. I'm hearing the concerns to get notice and the newness of this requirement. I could be persuaded to support an amendment to leave that in with some clarification that would avoid the problem, Jackie, you mentioned before, just people showing up and sort of thinking that there's something that they can do about it. The one thing I guess I would say is I don't think there's anything that prevents someone who is building one of these from notifying their neighbors and engaging in that discussion. And if they're not doing that without a requirement to do it, then I guess I would question how much the conversation that people are suggesting is going to be able to happen among neighbors. I don't know how much that would happen. Maybe it would. Maybe people just don't give notice because they don't think about it unless they're required to do so as part of the process. But there's certainly nothing preventing people from engaging their neighbors in discussions about things that they're going to be building that might have the sort of impact that Peter and others were mentioning in the comments. So again, I don't know that I really feel strongly about this if it's not a major dislocation for the office and it allows some of those productive conversations to happen. And not frustration over neighbors wanting to change something they don't have any power to change. But I am a little curious about it because it just seems to me like all those conversations can happen anyway without a requirement in the code.
Right, thank you. Commissioner Sandberg was next.
Thank you. I do share some of the concerns we're hearing about the notification. And I have heard this before as it was discussed that this would be a possible amendment tonight, that it is confusing to people when it is a by right procedure to think that they do have some sort of say over it. So I would think that the language itself could be changed to be less confusing and more clear about what that means. And again, I think I do appreciate the additional transparency of, not all neighbors speak to one another, to have the requirement that it at least be discussed with the neighbors in proximity. I think the case has been made, particularly with gardening, and as more people want to do gardening in their yards, that this could be an issue that could be resolved up front before any permit is granted for building or doing something that might impact a neighbor. So I think it's respectful. I will remind everybody that once we're finished with the Plan Commission vetting of all these amendments, we will have another opportunity when this comes before the City Council. And as the rep on the City Council, obviously, I've earmarked this as a particular discussion that we may have if we don't get it resolved tonight at this level. But I think it's something to think about. I also have some other thoughts now that I've heard the discussion about the parking, the interior parking with larger structures. And so that's something else too that we might earmark for just getting a little bit more information from our engineers, people who could address some of the questions that came up tonight. But in the main, I do support what's happening here in Chapter 3. Just those two things might cause us to take a little bit more of a pause when we get a chance to really scrutinize the implications.
Thank you. Other comments? Commissioner Kinsey, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate the public comment about concern and certainly particularly Elizabeth Cox-Ash's comment about it is the neighborly thing to do. I think we could all learn from these kinds of lessons. But I wonder if there is another mechanism to notice or somehow announce in a public way that might get that discussion going. I'm with Commissioner Kate that I think if a neighbor doesn't think that they need to tell anyone anything, that they might not likely do it, even if they, are given an opportunity or it's suggested. But I just wonder if there's another way, perhaps, I don't know if there's a mechanism in when documents are recorded, like at the point where there's prior to receiving a building permit, the petitioner records a deed. Is there any mechanism where that could be made public? To serve in that way of being more transparent about these changes. I'm just looking for another way here because I do think that the notice information that's in the ADU section is a bit in conflict with the information that's in the UDO around notice to interested parties. Those two things do seem to be a bit in conflict.
I can.
I just wanted to
Go ahead,
chime
Eric.
in real quick here. So, the accessory dwelling units, we see so few of those. And we always get calls from adjacent property owners whenever there's new construction on a property. To be honest, we get more of those calls for the construction of new single family houses, which happen a lot more than accessory dwelling units. People are like, oh, why wasn't I notified that, this vacant lot was having a house developed on it? And so, our struggle is, especially with accessory dwelling units, there are already so many standards for those that limit the size of them, that limit the number of bedrooms within them, that limit the owner occupancy. There are already so many standards. It's not really an intensification of use on a property. Most of these that we see are very small in size. So, the amendment to remove the notification that we've kind of talked about that really gives a notification to owners or adjacent property owners. There really isn't, while it does spur some negotiation or some conversation that this is happening within a neighborhood, it's not any more impacted than the construction of a single family house. And
Which we don't require notice for, right?
Right, which you don't require notice for. We get calls when people are like, oh, somebody's putting a fence up on their property. Why wasn't I notified? Oh, somebody's putting up a shed on my property. Why wasn't I notified? It gives that false hope or that false expectation that, that there's something that they can be a part of. And as, Beth and Susan certainly both just acknowledge, being neighborly and having those communications is great. But not everything requires a notification, nor should it be required to. So we're just trying to streamline this to make it easier for folks to do this.
Right, and I think I'll add, it could be a deterrent, we're trying to encourage them. It's great to be neighborly, to require that you tell your neighbors you're doing something that you're legally allowed to do by right is odd. And I think does and could discourage people. You know, we have very active neighborhoods here. If you are the type of person who wants to be super involved in your neighborhood and you want to build an ADU, you're going to go to your neighborhood association and talk to them about it or tell your neighbors. And if you're not, is it really our place to mandate that they tell their immediate neighbors about something that they are able to build by right? It just feels a little, you know, like in Eric's example, it just feels oddly specific for this use because we don't do it for more intensive uses or any other uses.
All right. Any other comments or questions from commissioners?
Brad, I did get one message from someone who couldn't figure out how to unmute. If you don't mind. I didn't know what to tell him.
Okay. Someone who was trying to make public comment?
Yeah, and couldn't figure out how to raise their hand. So one thing, can you go over the raised hand thing again? Because I can't see the screen that you all use, so I don't, or I would do it. And then also I can share the comment if that's appropriate, up to you guys.
Sure. Yeah. When you want to make comment, just click on the bottom of your screen. You should see a button that says participants. And when you click on that, you should see another tab pop up. And on the bottom of that, there should be a little button that says raise hand. And that's how you do that. Yeah, I'll allow it. I know it's difficult sometimes to keep up with the technology here, and I want to make sure everybody gets their chance to speak. So yes, as long as this is a comment specifically on ZO 03-21,
yes,
we'll go ahead and allow another comment here.
It's Perry Hodges. I support Peter's comment to keep notification provision. It's a way of keeping neighbors informed of what is happening. You don't always know. It happened to me and the neighbor had to undo something. It all ended up in a friendly way, but it was unpleasant to go through this just because we didn't know about it. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Oh, I want to add, we had got a message for some Zoom users. I don't know if it, you have to click on the reactions menu first and then raise hand. So thank you, Richard, for that. And
okay.
Chris.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. We all have different.
So if you don't, they have changed in different versions. So if you don't have it under participants, click on the reactions tab and you can raise your hand that way. And again, you can always send us a message by clicking the chat and just send a message to myself or to Jackie saying, hey, I have comment. We'll try to recognize you that way as well.
Brad,
there's still one.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's one.
Yep. I see we got one more. I think it's Perry Hodges.
No, it's Wendy and Ed Bernstein.
Yeah.
Hi, thanks. It's Wendy right now.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
I wanted to know, because I haven't studied this, but are there setbacks different from carports, for example, for ADUs? I've seen some ADUs that look pretty close to property lines. And I just wondered if that's up for discussion among neighbors or if neighbors are protected by some kinds of distance that ADUs have to be, and also the drainage issues. Are they covered in any requirements for ADUs since they're by right?
All right. Thank you.
And we have one more.
Yeah.
Okay. Do I get an answer?
It's not a question and answer session. I think they'll let us know if they want us to answer.
Yes. Yes, this is public comment and not time for back and forth, but we do usually try to get questions answered once we've completed the public comment. But in order to keep things moving and make sure everybody gets heard, we don't engage in back and forth during the public comment. So was there one more public comment?
Mr. Sturbaum.
Yes, I find the lack of notification to be disrespectful of the public and the homeowners. You know, that people could build an ADU with a duplex and the owner could be a student that a parent has bought the house from and nobody gets a notification. The other thing that's interesting is I've heard many times that we're having a 3-ring binder kind of attitude toward this UDO. And some of these things may not work right. And neighbors may get a chance to come in and comment, and maybe we'll be revising the UDO again in a different direction when some of these ideas don't pan out. So I think it just shows a kind of top-down disrespect for existing homeowners to not give them notification. Thank you.
Thank you. All right.
I just don't want to keep perpetuating this out
I
of
know,
line public comment, but I did
I think
receive a message just this. So I don't know if she couldn't raise her hand. Just saying it's ridiculous to require more public notice for ADUs than single family homes. Why are we giving more rights to single family homes? That's the last I have.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to the commission then for any other final comment or a motion. Commissioner St. John.
So just to very much clarify this, Jackie, we do not require notice for someone to build a single family home.
Correct.
Thank you.
Commissioner Kinsey.
Jackie, is it possible to address the question that Wendy Bernstein raised about the setbacks?
Sure. So the proposal is for the setbacks to be what they were when council approved them previously at 5 feet. So the same as what carport would be from side and rear, which would be most close to the neighbor. Same as in any other accessory structure.
Thank you.
Any other comments? How about a motion?
I'll motion.
Go ahead.
So motion to approve the amendments to petition Z0 or ZO0321 as specified. What are they, 28 amendments?
Yes. Here,
So
I can put
then-
I can put the motion up for you, Jillian. Sorry.
Yeah,
Thank
so the motion here is
The one here on the
to-
bottom.
Yeah, so we're moving this forward with a positive recommendation to City Council.
First, we have to suspend the.
Oh, yes, that's right. I forget the
So
two-part. Yes, the two-part. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
So scratch all that. So let's begin again. So I am motioning to first suspend the rules require only one hearing for ZO0321.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
All right, motion and a second to suspend the rules, to waive the second hearing. Jackie, would you call the roll, please?
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seabour,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
and Burrell.
Yes.
Okay, the rules are suspended, so we are now allowed to recommend forwarding of this to the city council. Would someone like to make a motion to that effect?
I'm happy to continue.
Thank you.
So I will motion to forward petition ZO0321, Amendment 3 to the Planning Commission or to the City Council with a positive recommendation.
As amended tonight.
As amended tonight.
Thank
you.
Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Motion
Seabour.
is-
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Seabour,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg.
Yes.
9-0, thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so we are now on to ZO04-21, Chapter 4, Development Standards and Incentives. Jackie, do you have a
I
presentation on
do.
this?
Yes, so this is another kind of hefty one here. Just a second. Okay, so chapter 4 is development standards and incentives. We have broken these up as well into 6 categories. The first here again are some pretty simple clarifications that we didn't take out because they would maybe want to be discussed, but are fairly simple. So the first is there's a table in the code that is related to conforming sites and structures only and what is required on those lots when someone is building on them. But it's not really labeled in such a way that that's clear. So we're just proposing to add a label, which is pretty simple. Number 2, a longstanding provision in the code is that you can use, if you have encroaching setbacks, side yard setbacks in residential, if you're doing additions, you can maintain those. You don't have to meet the new setback, the written code setback. That's been in code for some time. The language is a little unclear that it only applies to primary structures. So we'd like to just add that is not for accessory structures, which is the way it's been in practice for a number of years. And we think makes the most sense. So just to clarify that. We have gone around and around about the definitions of porch and deck for a number of years. We, for some reason in the code, have open and uncovered porch described as something that's allowed to encroach into a setback. We are proposing to change the definition of porch in Chapter 7 to describe what most people would traditionally think of as a porch, a covered structure with open sides. Because of that, we are taking it out of the encroachment allowance so that you basically wouldn't be having interior space. The encroachments are supposed to be for things such as decks or walkways, raised walkways that are outside structures. For the Karst Conservancy easement, we are adding a section in disturbance. Other environmental features have a specific disturbance section, so we're just trying to carry that forward for consistency. Even though the language does get to protecting that area, we just want it to be very clear what can and cannot be done. In the flood hazard reduction zone, the term on platted lots was added to where it's applicable, but not all of our lots are platted. So we are taking out that term so that all lots will be subject to flood hazard reduction requirements. We are adding R4, that R4 has to utilize alleys for vehicular access if available, if R4 is to be mapped, which is the same as R3 currently is. So because they are both the more urban, primarily single family districts, we wanted to be clear that those would have to meet the existing standards that R3 currently has to meet. We also added parking standards to the RM and RH so that if they are single family, plex, mobile home, or manufactured home users, that their parking standards are more in line with those types, with districts that have those primary uses, as opposed to the parking standards that are intended for multifamily. That obviously that district is, those districts are primarily for multifamily, but do contain some single family and plexes, and that the parking standards should be more in line with the use than the district in that situation. Number 8, clarifying that crushed stone is allowed for single family driveways. That's been the case for a long time, but in the new code, the way it went through, it wasn't very clear. So we're just stipulating that as well. Of course, you would have to have a raised border around the stone, but that you could use that in a single family situation. And then this is a similar case to the fence language, where there is language in table 4.5 related to transition standards that we are doubling up in another location in the code so that people can have easy access to that. I think that didn't make it on this list. I apologize, it's in the packet. And then, oh wait. Here we go, Lord. Okay. And then adding R4 to affordable housing incentives where the other R1 through R3 districts are, so that those same, for example, setback manipulation allowances incentives are allowed in R4 as well. Second category is pretty simple. We did a bunch of these in the initial, but then there were a few left over that made it through to this amendment. So it is syncing the language for neighborhood street to what the transportation now calls local street. And so there were four more instances of that than what you saw last week. Parking standard, we are proposing to increase the allowable parking for medical clinic. We have found over time that because of the way that appointments are scheduled, there is often a very tight schedule. There's often a very tight use of the parking lot, and most of our locations in town do not have street parking, which adds extra pressure to being able to sustain your own users on your own lot. And that of all the uses we have in the code, medical clinic is one that pops up time and time again, especially if it's a situation where someone has to be driven or picked up, then there might be extra users in the parking lot. So we're proposing to up that from 3.3 to 5 per 1,000 square foot in the building. We are proposing to add a longer parking area, deeper parking area for alley access for multifamily zone parcels. Again, acknowledging that they are allowed to have more people in their unit. So a longer driveway is more realistic for how much parking they need. Could also maybe deter kind of the overspill parking. We see sometimes gravel gets thrown down, it gets expanded a little bit in the yard if there was a longer, deeper distance allowed toward the building. And then we added a provision to make sure that if a driveway is deriving access from an alley on a corner lot, it has to be set at least 15 feet from the road so that it will not impede the safety at that intersection. And lastly, adding motorcycle parking space standard so that can be utilized in situations where a user would be interested in including that in a parking garage or parking lot. 3 quick architectural changes. There were not architectural standards at all for the mixed-use student housing district. So we are adding the typical other mixed-use district architectural standards to that district. Adding that in the mixed-use districts, metal can be used as a secondary finish material, which is obviously becoming more common. We've seen that around town. And also adding anti-monotony standards to those mixed-use districts where they previously did not exist to increase architectural interest on those buildings. 3 landscaping changes. The first is we are putting it in landscaping. It's kind of a confusing one. Basically, sometimes when you are developing a lot, you are required to put sidewalk along the roadway. Some of our rights of way are constrained and you can't actually fit a sidewalk in the right of way. So then you put the public sidewalk on your own lot and record a public easement to the public so it can be used in the same manner as a regular sidewalk that would be located in the right of way, which the city would own. What the code doesn't address yet, and what we're asking to address in this amendment, is that that square footage not be counted against you in the amount of space you're supposed to have open on your lot. So you're not putting the sidewalk in because you want to necessarily, it's for a public amenity. And so we're asking that not be held against you. For example, if you have a 40% open space requirement, that square footage of that sidewalk would not count against you. The second 2 are more kind of in practice for the planners, clarifying that mulch and decorative stone can only be used around plantings. That's something that was in the old code, has been practiced for a long time. But we want it to be a little clearer that you can't, fill your 162 square foot island with decorative stone. You can put mulch around your plants that are there, and otherwise you need to grass those areas. Because obviously it's cheaper to do something they don't have to maintain, but isn't necessarily better for kind of the green we're trying to encourage, as well as potential percolation over time as those other things get matted down when they're not organic. And the third is that we have had in the code for a while a 50% requirement that all shrubs that are required on a site plan be evergreen. But when we went to requiring native landscaping, that became very difficult to meet because there are only 2, I think, or maybe 3 native evergreen shrubs that could be used. So we can't meet any diversity requirements of those shrubs if we leave in the requirement for evergreen. So we are asking to remove that. And then 2 signage kind of cleanups. One is that we regulate non-retail tenants on the second floor differently than other types of tenants, and we would rather just regulate all second-story uses the same, commercial uses or non-residential uses, excuse me. And then that multi-tenant center signs, right now we have a maximum sign size for that, 20 square feet. And that is a wall sign. We would like to have that option be open for a projecting sign. I would say in practice, it's a wall sign, and the way the language is written, it's unclear whether or not it can be either. And we would like to make it clear that a projecting sign can also be appropriate. That's all I have.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Any questions from commissioners for Jackie on ZO 04-21? Commissioner St. John, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a quick question, Jackie, on the, thank you for that presentation, by the way, and for all the presenting you've had to do tonight. That's a lot of talking for all of us. So I know that we all really appreciate your focus and hard work tonight. So thank you. The parking, increasing it to 5 spaces for the medical use. How did you come up with that? I'm just kind of curious.
Sure. Eric, are you there? I can answer, but he may.
Yes, I am here. So there were a couple of medical clinics that had been approved through the past 10 years or so, and each one of those had done a parking study looking at different medical clinic uses that they'd done in other communities, analyzing the parking need, parking spaces and the demand. And so one of those was a dentist that was up on North Walnut Street. Another was for the Med Express building out on West 3rd Street. So in each of those, because as Jackie mentioned earlier, it's not like a typical where, you've got one office and one person in there. You'll oftentimes have 2 or 3 people waiting to get into kind of the same waiting room. So they had done parking studies for each of their locations, kind of looking at need, as well as other facilities within Bloomington. And all of those really had been pretty spot on in terms of what they had identified as their need. And so that's where we came up with that ratio, is based on those parking studies been done for a couple different situations.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I understand the need. I was just curious why it wasn't more than 5. I was thinking, and I don't have a recommendation here. It's just more of a curiosity with where we are, with what we've gone through as a community and a country with trying to get into medical offices, particularly vaccine clinics. And boy, I don't know how big the IU Health vaccine clinic is over on 1st Street, but it's tiny. And they are running a lot of people through there, and their parking lot's a huge mess. And so I'm not sure that, I just wonder if it could be more than 5, if that's even necessary. I don't know where we're going in the future as a country with vaccine cycle maybe needing to repeat itself again. And it just makes me wonder if the parking numbers shouldn't even be bigger, because medical care seems to be changing so dramatically. I guess on the other hand, it's also becoming, there's remote care as well. So I don't know, I'm just kind of thinking about that, if maybe it shouldn't be more than 5.
Sure, and we were just trying to be more conservative. Certainly it was a big leap to go from, I think, the 3 per 1,000 to the 5 per 1,000. So we were just trying to be more conservative with that incremental increase.
Mm-hmm. And I would say more kind of acknowledging that's a lot. So like when you look at the table, or it's more than what a lot of the other uses allow, and the trend, at least on the council end, has been to push down on the allowance, as we've seen in different petitions. So kind of trying to find that balance between, we do want them to be able to, we do want it to make a difference for them. But yeah, also leaving it reasonable so that we don't allow a sea of parking, which I think we've been trying to get away from for a number of years.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's good intuition. I think it's good to have a discussion about it. And if there's any place, particularly for the council, to allow for more parking, I think a medical clinic would certainly be deserving of that. So I just want to sort of maybe put a pin in that for Commissioner Sandberg to think about, and for all of us to think about as well. So thank you for to Eric too. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Cochran.
I just wanted to comment on this particular topic as well from a commercial standpoint. Three per thousand is pretty standard, and which is a lot more than what I've seen even here in Bloomington. So going to 5 feels like a lot, but I totally respect your comments, Commissioner St. John, and the fact that the demand is going to be much higher. But from my perspective, the 5 per thousand is more than I see as industry standards in commercial real estate as a whole. So,
Thank you. Any other questions from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we will go to public comment on ZO04-21. Once again, if you'd like to make comment, look to the buttons on the bottom of your screen. Some of you may see it under participants. Others may see it under the reactions button, but you're looking for a button that says raise hand, and that will signify to us that you'd like to make a public comment. If you can't find that button, feel free to use the chat and just send a message to myself or to Jackie or to everyone saying, hey, I have a public comment, and we'll try to recognize you. And once you're recognized, you'll have 5 minutes to make your comment. Do we have any public comment on
Don't see any.
ZO04-21? Anything on Facebook?
No.
Okay.
Hey, Brad.
Yeah.
I realized that there's one that was in the red line and the table that wasn't in the synopsis. So it is part of the group. So I need to explain it to you.
Okay.
Okay, sorry. I'm going to just throw up the.
Yeah, go ahead. Since we didn't have any comment, let's go ahead and get to this, and then we'll check again, make sure.
Thank you.
We don't have any comment from the public.
It was this here indicating that closer to a street, no entrance or drive shall be installed closer to a street than the existing or proposed front building wall running less than 45 degrees from parallel. What this basically allows is something that the BZA has been allowing for a number of years, which is that if you have a drive-through like the Chick-fil-A on 3rd Street, that it can run, it can't be any closer to the road than your the front of your building, but it doesn't have to be 20 feet set back because of some of our smaller lots that are more space constrained. Sorry about that. That's the last one. It is in the documents that are posted online, but it wasn't in the synopsis.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll go back to public comment now with that addition. Is there anyone who would like to make public comment? I do see one hand.
Yes, I wondered if there was any consideration of looking again at the 0.5 parking spaces required per unit on the duplex, and if this is the section that would be appropriate in.
All right, thank you. Any other public comment on ZO04-21?
None on Facebook either.
Okay, this is last call for public comment on ZO04-21. Going once. Going twice. Okay, we are back to the commission for any final comment or motion on 0421. Commissioner Sandberg. Go ahead, Commissioner Sandberg.
Yes, it was just a brief question, but I wonder if the staff would want to address Mr. Sturbaum's question.
Oh, sorry. I think Mr. Rooker could correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that that could be discussed under the 00921 on the night of discussing plexes. No, we have not proposed to change it at this time.
If there
Great,
were a
thank you.
change, Jackie, that would be in this chapter, in chapter 4, or would that be in?
Parking is in chapter 4, but
chapter-
because it's Plex specific, I think I probably would have erred on leaving it in that
chapter
week.
9?
Yeah, I agree. I think, Jackie, what you're referring to is germaneness here. I think it would be germane to discuss it with the plexes as well. I agree.
All right, thank you. Any other comments or a motion on 004-21?
A motion.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner
Yep.
Kinsey.
First, a motion to suspend the rules and allow for one hearing.
Second?
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Jackie, would you call the roll on that motion, please?
Yes. Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
and Seabour.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, the motion carries, so we can proceed without a second hearing. Do we have an additional motion on 004-21?
Move again on this one to recommend to forward ZO0421 to the City Council with a positive recommendation.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Great. Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg, Sandberg,
Yes.
Seabour,
Yes.
and Cockrum.
Yes.
9-0, thank you.
Okay. We are now on to 006-21. These are amendments to UDO Chapter 6, Administration and Procedures.
Correct. Thank you. So we have 4 proposed amendments here. They are 3 related to major site plan thresholds and 1 related to floodplain standards. As was discussed in the packet, we are proposing to delete 3 of the provisions that trigger major site plan review. The first is for developments that increase the units on a lot by 10% or more. Automatically become major site plans. We have seen, for example, we saw a development on 2nd Street that had 3 units and wanted to add a 4th, and then would have been required to vet that at Plan Commission. Again, a by right proposal, so just public presentation of a very small project. And we've had a couple other as well interest on small projects. And we don't think that that wasn't the intent of the provision, to fill the docket with small site plans that are by right. We wanted to put provisions in for major site plan that even if they were by right, that were going to be of a scale that would be of interest for open discussion to the neighboring property owners and those in the area. But we think that that one is probably too low. Additionally, we are recommending to delete the provision that requires existing developments that increase by more than 10,000 square feet or 25%, whichever is less, for the same reason. 10,000 square feet is not a lot on an existing, for example, office building. And we saw this play out on 2nd Street near College Mall, where it was a by right project. The Planning Commission wasn't able to do anything about it. But we think that these provisions are too strict. And the third is, not a deletion, but an amendment that currently any project with 30 units or more is automatically a major site plan and comes to Plan Commission. Then we would propose to increase that to 50. And then the last provision is related to expansion or remodel, a restriction that is in our code. And we would be adding language from the Flood Control Act so that we would be syncing with state code so that what happens now is if you receive one permit on your project in the floodplain, then that's it. You can't receive any more. And that we've seen play out in examples where they're trying to do an interior remodel, something small on the inside. They've already done a permit in the past. We issue them any more permits. So this allows for a more reasonable look at properties in the floodplain and syncing this portion of our code with the state. And those are the 4 I have. And then we had 2 proposed Plan Commission amendments. I think Ryan's going to put those in the chat if people want to look at them, but basically they are just clarifications. The city is not required to, the city can't bond for its own project. We can't bond to ourselves. So right now we do not accept bonds from the city for city public infrastructure projects or erosion control bond or projects that require erosion control bonds. However, it doesn't explicitly say that in code. And so we are adding a provision to each section related to those bonds, just so that someone who wasn't as familiar with the process would realize that no bond from the city is required. And that's all I have on that.
All right. So let's start with these amendments. We'll start with amendment number 1. Andrew, you're the sponsor of this amendment. Would you like to introduce it and make a motion?
Sure. So this is an amendment to clarify that the city is not required to bond for public improvements and new platted right-of-ways. So I make a motion to approve amendment number 1 for ZO-06-21.
We have a second.
Second.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on the adoption of amendment number 1?
Do we do any public comment on?
Yeah, we will go to the public on each of these amendments. Yep. But any comment or questions from commissioners? All right, seeing none, we'll go to the public. Again, a couple of ways that you can signify your intent to make public comment. Click on the participants tab or the reactions tab at the bottom of your screen and click that raise hand button if you want to make comment. Otherwise, send us a chat. Just click that chat button and send a message and we'll get you recognized so you can make a comment. This is comment specifically on amendment number 1 to ZO-06-21.
Nothing on Facebook.
Okay. Last call for public comment on amendment number 1. Going once. Going twice. Okay. We are back to the commission. Any final comment before we call the roll? All right. Jackie, please call the roll on amendment number 1.
Great. Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
and Cochran.
Yes.
Thank you. 9-0.
All right, amendment number 1 passes. Amendment number 2, also sponsored by Commissioner Seaboard. Would you like to introduce this one as well?
Sure. So this is a very similar amendment to the one we just reviewed. This would cover erosion control bond requirements for city-led projects. So essentially making it so the city does not need to bond for its own projects as it relates to erosion control bonds. So I recommend approval of amendment number 2 for ZO-06-21.
Second.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second to adopt amendment number 2. Is there any discussion, any questions or comments from commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move to public comment. And since I just explained it a minute ago, I'll forego the explanation again, but we'll look for any raised hands from the public if you'd like to make comments specifically on amendment number 2. Not seeing any. Check any comments there on Facebook. Last call for public comment on amendment number 2. Going once, going twice. All right, we are back to the commission. Any final comment before we call the roll on amendment number 2? All right, Jackie, please call the roll.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
and Kate.
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, amendment number 2 is adopted. So we are now back to our discussion on ZO06-21 as amended. Do we have any questions from commissioners on the petition as amended? All right, we will then go to public comment on ZO06-21 as amended. Is there anyone from the public who would like to make comment? Click your participants button or your reactions button and click on raise hand if you'd like to make comment. Or you can send a chat. Seeing none. Last call for public comment on ZO06-21 as amended. Going once, going twice. Okay, back to the commission for any questions, comments, or a motion on ZO06-21 as amended. As a reminder, we will first need to suspend the rules to forego the second hearing before we can vote on a recommendation. Commissioner Kinsey.
I'll motion first to suspend the rules to allow one hearing or to go to second.
Okay, motion and a second. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cochran,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and Whistler.
Yes.
9-0.
Okay, so that motion carries. The second hearing is waived and we can proceed with the recommendation.
Okay, I'll continue with this one to motion to forward as amended, Z0621 as amended to the city council with a positive recommendation.
Second.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Jackie. Please call the roll.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
and St. John.
Yes.
9-0, thank you.
All right, motion carries. We are now on to ZO07-21. These are amendments to UDO Chapter 7, which are the definitions.
Yes. So there are 7 proposed amendments. They're split into 2 categories, amended and new. The first are amended. We are recommending for the definition of building or structure primary. It currently reads a building or structure in which is conducted the primary use on the lot on which it is located. The way that primary uses have worked in Bloomington for many years is that you can have more than one on a lot. So we're proposing to change that to clarify that a building or structure in which is conducted any primary use that is a permitted use. So you can have more than one primary building on a lot. Secondly, we are proposing to change the definition of multifamily. There used to be a use in the code called upper floor dwelling units that was allowed mostly in downtown. That was removed with the code update and created an issue where those uses are not, that type of apartment is not described in code. So we are proposing to actually add that into the definition of multifamily, even when it's only one unit, that it is functionally multifamily because it is an apartment. So incorporating that into the definition of multifamily. For accessory dwelling units, when those were amended with the last approval, the UDO update in April 2020, it was decided by council that a family could live in each of the 2 structures if they meet the definition. So that is in the actual accessory dwelling unit specific regulation, but we neglected to then go back to the definition of family and change the ADU reference there, which said only one family can live on a lot. So we're proposing to sync that with the previously approved definition. And then we are proposing to add birthing center specifically to medical clinic because birthing centers by nature are kind of in between the line of medical clinic and our definition of hospital, but the way they function is much more closely related to a medical clinic. And so we are adding those to that definition. And then, as I mentioned before, changing the definition of porch so that, an open slab wouldn't count as a porch, but aligning it more with an architectural definition. And then 2 new sales, 1 firearm sales to clarify that use. It previously was under a sporting goods use that we don't have any longer. So it was limited and now it would be under a general retail, which would make it fairly unlimited. So kind of putting that back to a more limited location as we had previously. And then, as I mentioned before, adding the definition of small livestock for animals weighing under 100 pounds so that those could be explicitly allowed in the districts. And then we had 1 Plan Commission amendment. This was proposed by Plan Commissioner Chris Cockrum. It basically amends the definition of supportive housing, which already includes a shelter for people experiencing homelessness, but clarifies that they do not have to be seeking specific treatment or have a court mandated living there because it's court mandated. And then the other provision it removes, Chris, you may have to say it, I'm not getting off the top of my head, but those are going into the chat. That one is going to the chat as well, so people can look at it, and it was sent to the plan commissioners, of course. And that is all we have.
Great, thank you, Jackie. Let's start with the amendment. Commissioner Cockrum, would you like to introduce amendment number 1?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Commissioner Whistler. So looking at the definition of supportive housing and how it relates to homeless shelters. We looked at this, and So basically, the goal here is after reviewing the UDO, we did not feel that it properly addressed homeless shelters and thought that the homeless shelters would be possibly covered, or the thought is that it would be covered under supportive housing. However, we felt that the definition did not truly apply. So considering the rapid rehousing model, the goal was to revise this definition to remove potential hurdles that did not address homeless shelters, which is that there would be no requirement that a person live in a single housekeeping unit. And then also, as Jackie mentioned, that they would not provide exclusive care to persons requiring medical, correctional, and or mandated supervision or a protective environment. So we just felt that this would eliminate some of the hurdles and make it more, make it easier for us to find locations for homeless shelters in our within the UDO.
All right. Thank you, Chris. Would you like to move for adoption of amendment number 1?
Absolutely, and I move that we approve this amendment. Amendment number 1.
There you go. Yep. Is there a second?
Second.
Second.
We have a second and a third there. I'm not sure who came first.
I got it. Thanks.
All right. Okay. Any questions or discussion on amendment number 1? Let's see any. Okay, we'll move to public comment then on amendment number 1. Again, this is specifically on this amendment regarding homeless shelters. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to comment? If so, click on your participants tab or on your reactions tab and look for the raise hand button, or click on the chat button and just send us a message letting us know you'd like to comment. Not seeing any.
None on Facebook either.
Okay, last call for public comment on amendment number 1. Going once, going twice. Okay, we are back to the commission. Any final comments on amendment number 1? All right, let's call the roll on amendment number 1.
Okay, great. Burrell?
Yes.
Sandberg?
Yes.
Seaboard?
Yes.
Cockrum?
Yes.
Kate?
Yes.
Whistler?
Yes.
Kinsey stepped away. St. John?
Yes.
And Herrera?
Yes.
8-0. Thank you.
Okay, that motion carries and amendment 1 is adopted. We are now back to ZO07-21 as amended. Are there any questions from commissioners for staff on 0721, the definitions? See none. Okay. We will then go to public comment on ZO07-21 as amended. Again, if you'd like to make a comment, look for a raise hand button. That's either under the reactions menu or the participants menu at the bottom of your screen. Or click that chat button and just send us a message. I'm not seeing any hands raised.
No, nothing on Facebook.
All right, last call for public comment on ZO07-21 as amended. Going once, going twice. All right, and we're back to the commission. Any final comment or a motion on ZO07-21? As a reminder, we do need to suspend the rules before we consider a recommendation.
I move that we suspend the rules and require only one hearing for ZO -07-21.
Second.
All right, Jackie, would you please call the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey is out, I believe. St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
and Burrell.
Yes.
8-0. Thank you.
Okay, so the second hearing is waived, and we now move forward with a recommendation on ZO 07-21.
I move that we forward ZO -07-21 to the council with a positive recommendation as amended.
Second.
All right, motion and a second. Jackie, would you please call the roll?
Seaboard,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey's out. St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
and Sandberg.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, so that motion carries. We are now on to our final petition of the night, and that is ZO 08-21. And this is a petition to delete the RE district zone. Jackie, would you like to introduce this petition?
Yes, thank you. So this petition is to delete the zoning district residential estate. As we discussed briefly last week as well. We created a new zoning district in the 2019-2020 new code, and it is called Residential Large Lot 1. And when we went to map that district, we started looking at possible district areas that it would locate, and one of the places we looked is in RE. We found that the locations that seemed suitable based on lot size and or use were either fairly embedded in larger R2 districts and could work well as that as well, or they were in the RE areas. And so the decision was made to propose to kind of functionally combine the two districts. So the RE areas there aren't very many. There was a map in the packet, and I'll pull that up here shortly. We would be proposing, the RE districts, were kind of created as a way to allow for large lot development and also potentially protect some environmentally sensitive areas. In our zoning code, we have a number of environmental protections already that would all still stay in place, of course. And then residential large lot, if we were to rezone all of the RE to R1, would allow for the creation of more lots in this area. Again, not a mandate, but allowing for a smaller minimum lot size to create the possibility for additional development, additional parcels, and in conjunction with our existing environmental protections, would still leave those areas equally protected. We have proposed some of the RE uses to move into the R1 district. Many of the uses were the same. And then of course, dimensional standards for R1 were in the code. It wasn't a mapped district yet, but those would remain the same, just under 0.46 acres minimum lot size. And to be to have the potential to have more kind of traditional residential design than the RE allows for. So we are proposing through a series of red line amendments to basically to remove RE from the code, and then on the mapping amendment that we will see next week, we would rezone those areas to R1. One thing that has come up in our discussions with the public, I think there were some public comments, a potential public comment in the packet we received, is concern about some of the uses that came from the RE or didn't or changed, went from permitted to conditional, for example. I think that's probably the crux of the discussion here tonight. I would say that staff does not have, is not overly concerned that if we moved all of the existing RE regulations into R1, we think that that could be appropriate as well. We basically, there were some uses that existed in both already, and we carried forward the R1 designation. So for example, if it was permitted in RE and conditional in R1, we left it as conditional. But don't think that switching those to the RE would be inappropriate if that's something that the commission would be interested in doing. And that is all I have. I will get that map queued up in case anyone wants to see it.
All right, thank you, Jackie. Any questions from commissioners about ZO 08-21? Commissioner Kate, go ahead.
I guess it's less a question, well, maybe it's partly a question than a comment, but reacting to the comments that we received from the public, and in particular, I think the Moravians are here tonight. I can see the name cropping up in the crowd. So as I understand it, those concerns are largely how much of their lot, which was RE, moving to R1 under now a designation of certain uses that would be accessory. Would those be too restrictive for the amount of land that they've got that they want to devote to uses they were planning before this rezoning? And so, Jackie, did I understand you correctly just now that staff would not be concerned if in fact the prior RE designations for those sorts of uses, so some commercial agricultural uses, moved into R1 in their prior designations, so permitted as opposed to accessory, for example, or conditional as opposed to accessory?
Correct. Yes, we have kind of been able to talk about that a little bit more. Didn't have time to flesh out that amendment and talk to one of you about possibly doing it. But yeah, I do think we were expecting that that would come up, and we're able to look at the uses as they are in RE now, and you know, it's the same physical area, you know, so it's not changing where those things are allowed physically in Bloomington. It would be, you know, on if, for example, a large property was subdivided and turned into 10 smaller properties, then some of the uses, you know, for example, like a commercial orchard or something may become odd. But yes, we do think that if there was an amendment to amend the allowed uses for the proposed R1 to match existing RE, that we think that could be appropriate, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Or I would say, Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, but we may need to say, if this is something you all are interested in doing, that any uses that existed in RE would move into proposed R1 with the existing designation, but then other uses that didn't exist in RE can still remain as well. Like if there were some uses in R1 that weren't in RE,
right.
I wouldn't want to inadvertently exclude them.
Well, I would be interested in making that amendment.
I'll write something up. Yeah.
Thank you.
Commissioner St. John.
I just want to voice support for that as well. Commissioner Kate, that is what I was going to bring up as well. So thank you, Jackie, for doing that. I see some other people nodding their heads, but I would support that also. Thank you.
Just for clarification, Jackie.
Yes.
So if there was a use that is already happening in the property where the person lives right now, that use will continue? Is it grandfathered, or do they have to get permits? I mean,
sure. Any existing use can continue on in its state whenever a rezone occurs. But in this case, I think they're more concerned about planned uses that would then become conditional that were permitted, not something they've actually already started. If you're already doing a use on a site, yes, it becomes If it changes, if the designation changes, then it would become lawful non-conforming, but you would not have to make any changes on the ground if you were continuing on the same as you had been before.
I guess I want to make sure that we address the concerns of the citizen on Dunn.
Yes.
If it's a use that he has not started yet or was planning to do it and won't be able to do it because of the rezone, I guess that's my concern.
Yes.
And how do we address that?
Yes, I think we will. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that would be addressed by the amendment that Jackie just mentioned. And I think sounds like we will consider that shortly here. I believe Jackie's going to try to author something.
Yeah, I'm
that we
just
can
writing it up.
consider.
Sorry.
In the meantime, is there any other questions regarding ZO08-21? All right, well, we'll just give, Jack, are you planning to just post something in the chat here?
Or I'll just put it up on the screen and see what you guys.
Okay, great.
Okay, let's see if this makes sense. So I think you could say motion to amend the allowed use table for the proposed R1 zoning district so that existing RE uses will be allowed with their respective allowance, permitted, conditional, et cetera, in addition to those uses that are R1 only. Mike, do you think that makes enough sense to follow in 3 years?
Yeah, yes, I think that's sufficiently specific that staff can then properly address it. So.
Thank you.
Jackie, I think that's admirable on the fly.
Thanks.
Yes, well done. Just to follow up on that, though, if we were to adopt this amendment, would you go ahead and update those tables then prior to presentation at the council?
Yeah.
So they wouldn't have to just look at this language. They could actually look at the updated tables.
Yes, I believe so. Mm-hmm.
Yes,
and we can give them both. Okay, sorry. Yes, Mike, go ahead.
No, yes, that's what would happen. So this would be a motion of this type would be taken as delegating to staff the authority to actually modify the language so that when it goes to the next step for council review, it would appear fully amended, if that makes sense.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. Any questions or comments on, we'll call this Amendment 1 to ZO08-21? I'm seeing none. Okay, let's go then to public comments, specifically on amendment number 1 here to ZO08-21. This is just the question of whether we should amend the tables to continue to allow uses from the RE district. I see one hand raised.
Beth, you can go ahead.
Hi, thank you very much. I really want to thank the commission for listening to our concerns and trying to work with us on doing what's best for the city, as well as for our move and what we're trying to do here with our property. I just wanted to clarify that would remove the restriction of only 25% of our land use being able to be used for agriculture and orchard use. And then one of my biggest concerns is with the lot size minimum and developers eyeing our 6 beautiful properties on Dunn Street as a potential neighborhood. And I'm speaking for myself and the neighbors where we want to maintain our lots and make sure that there aren't these pushes for us to redevelop and have more properties on site. So I would like to propose that also the size limits maintain on these properties as well, with the 2.5 acre minimum and the 200 feet width minimum as well. These properties are so unique, and to have them turned into more development would would be devastating, I think, to the city, but to myself and at least the 3 neighbors I spoke to that own some of these other properties.
The green space is important.
Yeah, the green space. Yeah, sorry, Tom's here
This
too.
is Tom Meridian, Beth's husband, and yeah, I submitted the letter, and just I can't thank you enough for reading it thoroughly and for hearing our concerns and proposing this amendment. We think it's a great step towards enabling us to do what we think is not just good for our family, but good for the city, to have a source of local food and a working farm that hopefully can be a source of inspiration and education for people. So thank you.
And I think that's the end of our comments, so thank you.
Nothing on Facebook, Brad. Brad, are you talking? We can't hear. So sorry, I couldn't tell.
Classic, classic Zoom faux pas. I was muted. We are looking for final call here for public comment on Amendment 1, specifically Amendment 1 to ZO 08-21. If you'd like to make comments, send us a chat or click on participants or reactions and click on raise hand. Last call for public comment on Amendment number 1. Going once. Going twice. Okay, and we are back to the commission. Any final comments on Amendment number 1? Seeing none. Jackie, would you please call the roll on Amendment number 1?
Did we do a motion? Did we move and second that?
I don't know.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that we did, but let's just clarify. Beth, did you want to make the motion?
Sure.
Thank you,
So, yeah, no worries. So I move to amend the allowed use table for the proposed R1 zoning district so that existing RE uses will be allowed with their respective allowances, permitted, conditional, et cetera, in addition to those uses that are R1 only.
Second.
Okay, we've got the motion in the second. Will you please
Thank
call
you.
the roll?
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Herrera,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg, Sandberg,
Yes.
sorry, Seabour,
Yes.
9-0, thank you.
Okay, the amendment is adopted. So we are now back to discussion on ZO 08-21 as amended. Any other questions or comments from commissioners on ZO 08-21 as amended? There was one question brought up in the public comment about lot sizes. Jackie, could you
Yes.
address that?
I think, yeah, it's definitely something we considered. We have to weigh all of our concerns. So environmental and, unique living situation against our need for more housing. So one of the ways we can get more housing is by having more lots. And we do focus on creating locations for single family housing as well as our multifamily areas. So by reducing the minimum lot size here, we think that could lead to opportunities for some more right size lots in this area, still not very small like our urban lots closer to the downtown. Additionally, property owners want to put deed restrictions on their own lots so that, in the future they're not subdivided or, not sell those off. Obviously, that's always an option as well. But regulatory, we think is appropriate to allow for some development to occur in these areas.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? All right,
Well,
we will, oh,
sorry.
sorry, go ahead, Commissioner Burrell.
Well, I guess just addressing for the homeowner in this location specifically of 6 acres on Dunn Street. It's still one single parcel. Nobody can force you to divide your parcel or sell a parcel. You own it. You have the deed. It's your ownership. And like Jackie said, you can add a deed restriction to your residential lot for future sales if you decide to sell down the road or the neighbors. So that's something to consider. Just giving you an idea, I guess.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments from commissioners? Okay, we will then go to our final opportunity for public comment tonight. This is comment on ZO08-21 as amended. Are there any public comments? Again, if you'd like to make comment, you're looking for that raise hand button, which is either under participants or reactions on your bottom menu there, or just send us a chat.
Nothing on Facebook.
Okay, last call for public comment on ZO08-21 as amended. Going once.
Oh, we have one here.
Oh, I see one. Yep.
Elizabeth?
I'm not sure if this is the time to say something about this, but I have been involved with Plan Commission for over 30 years and 5 different plan commissioners in this time period. I moved into McDowell Gardens when we purchased our lot in 1991. That's 30 years ago. In this time period, I've been involved with all the different orientations of the various UDOs. What really concerned me was in 1999 and 2000 when the UDO was changed and the northern part of our neighborhood was rezoned due to the 800-pound gorilla, which was Bloomington Hospital, to Future Medical, without even notifying the residents whose properties is involved. It also had an element along Hillside, which was in the planning to be a highway east that would dead end to Rogers, tearing down the current housing, which was historic. All of this was really, how shall I say this? It was shocking to all of us in McDowell Gardens, to the point where we went ahead and as a neighborhood went for a historic conservation district, which was Bloomington's first and the state's second.
I'm so sorry, Elizabeth, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And it's just that I have other members of the public here who would also like to comment on things not on the agenda. And we already told them they could not because they can't. That's not how our rules work. So I'm sure Brad was about to tell you that, but I just feel bad letting you go when I told them they couldn't.
I would like to finish because I have not.
If it's related to the RER1.
I am concerned that the density that Plan Commission is forcing on the core neighborhoods is really unrealistic and not, how shall I say this? We must have gold in our grounds because we've had this constant attack on the core neighborhoods. Now y'all are trying to force plexes on the core neighborhoods and not on other areas where the density could be allowed.
Ma'am, I have to stop you because we are not discussing the plexus tonight. So I have to ask you to keep your comments to ZO08-21 regarding the RE district. We'll have opportunity to comment on plexus at our next meeting.
I will
on
talk
Thursday.
to you on Thursday.
All right, thank you very much. Any other public comment on ZO08-21? Anything on Facebook there, Jackie?
No.
All right, last call for public comment on ZO08-21. Going once, going twice. Okay, we are now back to the commission for any final comment or for a motion on ZO08-21 as amended. Again, as a reminder, we'll need to suspend the rules before making the recommendation.
I move that we suspend the rules and require only one hearing for ZO-08-21.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Jackie, would you call the roll, please, on that motion?
Great. Whistler,
Yes.
Kinsey,
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Pereira,
Yes.
Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seabour,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
and Kate.
Yes.
9-0. Thank you.
Okay, the second hearing is waived. We can now move forward with a recommendation on ZO08-21 as amended.
So I move that we forward ZO-08-21 as amended to the City Council with a positive recommendation.
Second.
All right.
Kinsey,
Call the roll.
Yes.
St. John,
Yes.
Pereira,
Herrera? Yes.
Pereira, sorry, Burrell,
Yes.
Sandberg,
Yes.
Seabour,
Yes.
Cockrum,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
and Whistler.
Yes.
9-0. Thank you.
All right, thank you all for your participation, your patience. That's the final petition for this evening. Just as a reminder, we have 2 remaining petitions on the agenda. Our next meeting will be Thursday at 5:30. We will be taking up ZO09-21. That is really the only agenda item we will likely move to postpone or to continue ZO10-21, which is the actual adoption of the new zoning map, to the following meeting, which will be 1 week from today on Monday at the same time. So we have the entire meeting on Thursday dedicated to the petition regarding plexus, and we'll take up discussion of that then. And yeah, thanks again for everyone's patience, and thank you, staff, for all your hard work.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Quick
Yeah,
question.
go ahead. Go ahead.
Based on the last comment we had, how are we going to address when people get out of hand with comments on Zoom?
It's a good
Well, I
question.
mean,
Yeah.
we want to make sure everyone has a chance to comment. And I know when we get into discussion of the plexus, it's easy to get into bigger issues. So we just have to ask everyone to to keep their comments germane to the topic at hand. I'm sure we'll have a lot of public comment, and we'll just have to keep moving through it. We want to make sure that everyone has a chance to get heard, and in order for that to happen, we need everyone to be respectful and stick to the topic at hand. So we'll try not to cut people off if we don't have to. Hopefully we'll be able to do it, but yeah, I would just ask everybody to come armed with patience on Thursday. It's I'm sure there's going to be a lot of discussion, and we'll do our best to keep things moving.
So I have a question regarding the time. If we have too many participants, public comment, are we going to stick to the 5 minutes, or it will depend on the number of participants?
Yeah, typically, yeah, thank you. Good question. Typically what we'll do is we would look for a show of hands to see how many people intend to make public comment. And if there are too many, we could reduce the length of comment, or put a limit on the total time for public comment. I don't want to preemptively do that, but I think we'll try our best to get kind of a show of hands early in the meeting as to how many want to make public comments, so we can address that appropriately. That's going to be a challenge given the format we're using here, but I think we'll at least be able to get a sense of whether it's tens of people or hundreds of people who would like to make comment, and we'll address that when the time comes. If there is not a motion to change our rules, then it would be 5 minutes, as is typical. So think about how you want to proceed. When we get there on Thursday, if it looks like we need to try to shorten that, commissioners are welcome to make a motion to change the rules. Commissioner Sandberg, looks like you've got a question or a comment. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much. And I would like to make an appeal right here and now to everyone in the public who does wish to speak to this issue, that civility is so critically important. Regardless of your emotions, regardless of how concerned you are, I would just urge everyone to think about that 5 minutes that they will have to make their comments, and to be brief and to be concise and to keep it on the issues and not with respect to anyone's person or personality, no name calling. That is going to be of the utmost importance. I will, however, also suggest that we allow anyone who wants to speak the entire 5 minutes, because that, there is a lot of pent up feelings about this. And I think sometimes 3 minutes or less is just not enough to articulate your point in a way that is productive. So since plexus are the only issue on the table on Thursday evening, I would suggest that we try not to limit anybody's time, but public, be prepared. If there are just, hundreds and hundreds of people, there is a hard stop with these meetings, right? It's 9:30, right? That we don't introduce anything new. And so we want to kind of keep to being respectful for everyone's time on Thursday night and still allow everyone the opportunity to speak respectfully and as fact-based as you can possibly make your comments. And that's my appeal. We can't control it entirely, but again, I'm counting on the chair to interrupt anybody who does abuse the privilege of this public forum. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner St. John.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember, because this isn't like a complete redo of what we did the first time, but it's going to be similar. We'll probably see a lot of the same people commenting with their concerns. Did we allow 5 minutes back then? Because they were really long meetings, but I'm just curious if we did 5. I feel like we did 5.
I have to look, I can't remember.
They were really, the one meeting was very late. So I just think we might want to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. We might want to.
Go ahead.
No, you think it was 5 or 3?
I'm not sure, but I'll let you guys know before. I can quickly look one up and see what we did.
Yeah, I guess I lean on let's do what we did before, because it is transparency and the time for the public to say what they think and change it. I mean, I'm open to a proposal to change it, but I would like to at least know what we did before when we went down this road. If it was 5.
Yes, I can let you. Sorry, I don't remember off the top.
No, it's fine. Thanks.
Commissioner Kinsey.
I'm sensitive to the comments we've already seen in some of the submitted amendments and suggestions and objections to some of the changes, that we don't rush this. So I really want to make sure that we are considerate. So I guess I am in favor of allowing the full 5 minutes, because I don't want to give the appearance that we're somehow rushing through this. And I would also urge us to consider using whether we want to suspend the one hearing. I'm not suggesting that we do anything of but realize that we have that as one of the opportunities is to not forego the second hearing. And I really want to make sure that we're being responsive to public concern. The one thing I'll just add to that is I have been very impressed with the number of public who have turned out to both city council meetings and other meetings that have raised significant public concern. And I really think that Zoom in some ways has afforded more participation than we had previously with in-person meetings. I know it's challenging to figure out the technology, and I concede all of that. And I think we've all been very helpful to one another to try and make sure that we're giving people the chance that they have to negotiate the technology to say what they need to say. But I also want to make sure that we acknowledge the fact that the Zoom platform has really allowed, I think, a lot more people to participate who were not able to because of childcare, because of mobility issues, because of all sorts of things that now they are able. So I appreciate how many people are turning out for this, but I also want to not appear like we're rushing anything.
Thank you. Commissioner Kate.
Yeah, I will echo. I think it's very important to have a full hearing of this, so I would support that full 5 minutes as well. Also, I don't know whether, as with our earlier meeting, as Commissioner St. John mentioned, we went well past 9:30. I mean, we had several hearings at that point that were longer. Maybe that's an option as well. If really it's required to have a full fleshing out of the issues. The only other thing is I just wanted to make sure people saw it, because they may or may not be looking in the chat, but there's a reminder from Scott and Jackie about the ability to still submit written comments on the project website that we will still get then before Thursday's meeting. So.
Thank you. Commissioner St. John.
Yeah, just one more quick comment. Also thinking about those meetings previously when they ran really long, just now speaking to my fellow commissioners that we've all been sitting in this chairs and staff since 5:30. And I'm guessing a lot of us also went to work today, along with people in the public who've been to work, that we did, I think former Commissioner Hoffman took a couple meetings where he gave everybody a 5-minute break because it was just like a long time. So I think we might want to consider that too. It might make it more palpable going into the meeting on Thursday if we know after some amount of time we could take a 5-minute break. So
it's very likely that around 7:45 I will leave and put my kids to bed and be gone for hopefully 45 minutes. So we would probably take a break. We could take a break at that time, switch host to somebody else, and then I think that could probably end up being a natural break for the long meeting nights.
Yeah, I will say I don't expect that we're going to have a great deal of technical discussion between staff and the commission on this. The changes are fairly straightforward. We know what they are and what they mean. And so I think the vast majority of our time will be for public comment on Thursday. We have a rule that we will not introduce any new motions after 9 p.m. And so hopefully we conclude everything prior to that. You have my word, we will have a break before 9 p.m. if it gets that long. Because yeah, we want to make sure we're all thinking clearly before making decisions. So any other final questions or comments before we adjourn? All right, thanks again, everyone.
Thank you.
We will see you on Thursday.
Have a good night.
We are adjourned.